Hello, everyone. I'm Liz McDonald, filling in for Judge Andrew Napolitano, who returns tomorrow for a Thanksgiving special that asks, what happened to our Constitution? But tonight we ask, what happened to our priorities? Defense Secretary Leon Panetta has spent the last month warning Congress about mandatory cuts in defense spending. Cuts the former congressman and White House budget director says the military cannot afford. All this as new reports emerge, well, that the defense secretary has spent nearly $500,000 of your money flying home to California on the weekends in the less than 6 months he's been in office so far. That's sort of like what other members of Congress have been doing, using the military for junkets and the like. But is military planes, by the way, but is $1 in defense spending really equal to $1 in military strength, or could we be more secure by spending less? Here to weigh in is former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton. So, Mr. Bolton, a number of Republican congressmen support cuts in defense spending. It's Senator Tom Coburn, Rand Paul, Eric Cantor has said it has to be on the table, Haley Barbour. Where do you come down?
Well, I think this is a big mistake for the United States. There's no doubt there's waste and fraud and abuse in the Defense Department. Of course there is. It's a government agency. But the money that you can save in defense needs to be plowed back into it. We have been underspending on defense given the threats we face globally, and the notion that additional massive cuts in defense appropriations are possible is going to leave this country very much in danger. All
right, let's be clear what we're talking about. The Pentagon has already agreed to $450 billion in cuts as of last summer. Now we're talking about the automatic debt triggers because of the failure of the Super Debt Committee, adding about another $492 billion. So that's about $1 trillion over 10 years, $100 billion a year. Really, the Defense Department can't find $100 billion a year in cuts?
Well, really, it's more than that, because there have already been $400 billion in cuts in the Obama administration's first 3 years, so it's more in the range of $1.5 trillion. And the fact is, a lot of what's going to happen here is we're not going to be able to procure weapon systems that we need to face, for example, a newly assertive Chinese military, to worry about potential threats in the Middle East, to worry about a newly assertive Russia. You know, here's what I believe. I don't believe the United States should ever be in a fair fight. I think we ought to be in a position of what the military calls full spectrum dominance. Because the best war is the war that isn't fought, and the best way to ensure that that happens is to be in a position that nobody wants to challenge us.
I hear your point. I understand. And, you know, I got to tell you something. A personal matter. My mother lost her father, my grandfather. You know, he was hit with mustard gas in World War I. She never knew him. I've got uncles, and my father fought in the Korean War. In other words, we've got military in my family, and my family is all for supporting the troops, as I know you are. But can we support the troops with less spending? That's the issue, because, you know, Colonel Douglas McGregor, who's retired, is saying, look, there's a lot of money in the Pentagon that's spent on cash payoffs. He's saying overseas infrastructure aid, you know, nation building projects. Defense is spending more on just nation building than just military power. Can we just find the cuts there, do you think?
Well, I think that there are certainly changes that can be made. I'm not a fan of nation building. I don't think that amounts to an awful lot of money, and I think it'd be a mistake to believe that even if we save that, that it would amount to a really substantial savings. But let me go back to a point you made at the beginning. I am fully prepared to argue that $1 spent on national defense is not the equivalent of $1 spent in the Agriculture Department or the Department of Health and Human Services. It's a qualitatively different measure of federal responsibility. We're not going to have a strong economy if we don't have a secure world internationally. By the same token, we're not going to have a strong defense unless we have a strong economy.
But why should the U.S. be the world's policeman? All right, we've got the military budget of nearly about $700 billion. It's it's higher in real terms than at any time during the Cold War. So, I mean, isn't there, I just think that there's room somewhere. You got F-35 planes, for example, $156 million apiece, and there has to be waste. There has to be fat marble through that Pentagon budget that you could cut, you know, $150 billion a year.
Well, as I said before, there is fat you can cut, but let's be clear. In the 1950s, defense was 60 to 70% of the federal budget, and a far greater share of GNP than it is today. So in looking at the absolute numbers is not the proper metric, especially when you consider the threats we face from terrorists who are seeking nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, and the strategic threats we face around the world. You know, people talk about cutting the F-35, cutting the F-22, as China is developing its new fighter bomber capabilities, as the Russians are getting to their fifth generation of fighter planes. And it comes back to this. Do you want our folks to be in a fair fight,
but you
or
know
do you
what,
want them to be dominant?
But we didn't, isn't it true, and Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan made a point of this, that we overstated Russia's military strength, Soviet Union rather, and then Soviet Union collapsed. The same might be said of China right now. We're seeing economic data that China is struggling right now. It could be a paper tiger. What do you make of that? Give you the final word.
Want to flip a coin on
it? No, you go ahead. You flip it. Call it.
No, but that's the point. This is not the risk that you take if you don't spend enough on the Interior Department or if Medicare payments aren't high enough. This is the survival of the country itself that's at stake. And it's not just weapon systems, although those are very much threatened by these cuts. Across the board, we're going to have to lose military manpower. And I tell you, our adversaries around the world read these budgets just like we do. We're the most transparent country in the world. They see a declining U.S. military. They're going to take advantage of it.
It's an important point you make there, Ambassador Bolton. Always good to be with you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Have a happy and safe Thanksgiving, sir. Thank you so much. Next up,
defense spending.